You're now tuned in to The Twisted Truth with Corey Wesley, where everyday conversations take an unexpected turn. Entrepreneur, artist, author, and truth seeker, Corey Wesley is here to challenge the way we think, question the norms, and bring fresh perspectives to life, business, and beyond. With unfiltered discussions, special guests, and real talk, get ready for a show that's bold, insightful, and always a little twisted. Buckle up, because the truth isn't always what it seems. And now, here's your host, Corey Wesley. Hi, welcome to another episode of The Twisted Truth with me, Corey Wesley. And I'm excited today because we have a special guest, new friend of mine named Travis. And today what we're going to talk about is hookup apps, communicating, biases, things that kind of make being gay and hooking up somewhat of a challenge and a struggle. And my conversation with Travis one night was very insightful, and I thought his perspective was very useful to me, and I learned some things and inspired me, and I thought he would inspire you as well. So Travis, welcome and thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Corey, for having me.
Well, Travis, why don't you give everyone a little brief synopsis of who you are, what you do, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so like Corey said, my name is Travis. I am a addictions counselor and a recovery coach here in New York. And what I do with my daily life is I try to help people who have gone through some of the same struggles that I've gone through in my life, trying to find their own authentic self and find a way to break away from the shame that so many of us carry around with us for many different reasons. And my own journey coming to that was very powerful, and it was freeing, and it brings much joy to my life and purpose to my life to help others do the same.
Well, thank you, Travis, for that intro. So, when we were talking and comparing notes and things of that nature, when we were talking about hookup apps, and I was sharing some traumatic things that have happened to me, just like being falsely accused and things of that nature. And I find that sometimes when we are on the hookup apps and when we're, meeting people for the first time, we're not totally authentic to a certain point. And also we have these expectations. What experience have you had, or do you feel in regards to hooking up, I guess, expectations that you see other people have, maybe you have, that cause maybe a disconnect from the person that you're meeting?
Yeah, so I think that especially on these hookup apps, we all get on there with a specific thing in mind that we're looking for, and that starts to create this expectation that we have for others. And like we had in our conversation the other night, we talked about how we don't actually ask the questions
Right.
to the other person. We don't get to know what that other person is looking for because we're so focused on what we want. What I want becomes so important to me that I forget to see this
Engage.
other person and
Right.
engage with them and
Mhm.
find out if this is truly going to be a compatible thing, or if we're going to show up and it's going to wind up being something that neither of us want because we're both trying for something different.
Right. Now, do you think that when people in the gay world environment, that they have these preconceived notions based on possibly porn and looking for this instant gratification, instead of that instead of that we're not dating, you're kind of going
Mhm.
into it so quickly that it's not that this person doesn't want to engage in that, but it's kind of looking at it on an instant gratification standpoint.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. I think for a lot of us, at least for myself, in the past that I've gone into it with these. I was a heavy porn watcher, and
Okay.
so a lot of what I wanted and fantasized about is based on what I saw on porn,
Okay.
which is not based in reality. And there's a lot of it that had to do with the expectations that society had put on me too. The things like my family, my upbringing, coming up in a religious family, there was a lot of shame that surrounded sex itself, just whether talking about it, having it, whatever it was. So that shame, those societal norms and expectations, what I would see on porn, conversations that I would have with other people,
Mhm.
um, those all informed what my fantasy would be, what I would was looking for
R
and expecting to find.
right.
So when it came to what I would face in reality, reality hardly ever matches
Matches the
fantasy.
fantasy.
It's never fantasy. So finding and because of all that informing what was in my head fantasizing, as I started to heal myself and understand myself a little better, I started to realize that that fantasy isn't what I actually wanted.
Okay, I get that.
Yeah,
And I mean, you know, from my perspective, I went from college into a relationship.
yeah,
So it was 15 years or so in a relationship. So me identifying to say my gayness, so to speak, wasn't driven by porn or me learning about being gay was conjoined with someone else. So I have a different connection. Like we talked, I think my understanding of relationships and even, I guess, being single and being in the hookup environment now that I guess am conditioned because I started out in a relationship standpoint. So my whole conditioning is different,
yeah,
so to speak. Now, when you talked about like, you know, the different biases and the things that you saw in porn, specifically, I know maybe you may have an array of people that you might be attracted to. From my aesthetic, I find that Caucasian men have a misconception of black men in porn.
yeah.
What's your take on that?
Yeah, so Caucasian men are definitely not all of us,
Not
but there's a large portion of us that when we start looking for African American men online for
mhm,
hookups, it's because we're looking for that BBC,
right.
and that's very prevalent in it. But the problem with that is, I think you brought that up the other night, how
Hmm.
that just it takes the human out of that person,
Right.
and they become just
An object.
yeah
And
an
I,
object.
right.
There's nothing here up or below the waist. It's just all right here.
Right. And I think like what you had said, you brought a point of it becomes transactional.
Yeah, it's very transactional.
I find that in porn, and I have to be honest, I don't participate in it that much. I'm so against it just because I find that African American, just minorities in general, are not perceived in the best light. I find that minority men, specifically black men, are perceived aggressively. Um, this mandingo kind of fetishized about you have to um, take over someone and be so aggressive towards them that, like you said, it loses the human side of a person. Plus, my argument always has always been if a Caucasian person wants that aggression in bed, but that African American being aggressive with them on a regular day in their street clothes, you probably wouldn't want that. And then it's almost like indirectly buy into the stereotype instead of empowering men of color to be loving, caring. Now, I want to ask you because you know you said you watch porn more than I have. Am I wrong to say that black men or just Caucasian, I mean minority men are perceived as aggressive? Are there porns that show men of color as loving?
They may be out there, but I haven't seen them.
Okay. Well, thanks for the honesty. Yeah, I mean, so what do you think? How can that? Because obviously that's a battle that we can't really. I mean, it's ingrained in the gay
Yeah,
community. What are ways that we can improve that? Obviously, when I meet people, I unfortunately become the bad guy because
yeah,
I bring up topics of,
yeah.
oh, I'm not doing that because of this, and then it becomes a serious dialogue, and then obviously the sex part of being attracted to a person fizzles because now they're bringing up serious topics. How can we get around that a little bit? Or do you have any ideas?
I think those topics need to be had before the meetup happens first. Those conversations need to be had. We need to know what we're getting into, what the other person wants, and make sure that If what I want is not what the other person wants, then
Mhm.
maybe that's not the person I need to be meeting up with. The
Okay.
compatibility is just not there.
Hmm.
So I think that's going to be a very important thing, and that's something you shed a little bit more light onto it than for me the other day in our conversation.
Hmm. But
But
do you think,
also we also need to lead with authenticity ourselves.
right,
So if I'm not bringing my authentic self to the conversation, then you're not going to get to know me.
right?
So
There's this give and take a little bit.
yeah, it is.
I find though, I agree with you that there's people don't talk
Yeah,
or like, okay, that's these very generic questions. I find that even though someone might present some things that people don't hear them,
yeah,
so they're still going to go into that setting already with their own perceived notions of what that person's going to be like, what they're going to act like, how they're going to talk. Even
yeah.
though you asked the question, I guess what's your understanding or idea of that?
I think that's another area where that just sometimes when we have those conversations and we're asking the right questions, are we really listening to what the answers are? And that I think there's a saying in recovery that says seek to understand rather than be understood.
Okay,
Um,
elaborate on that
yeah,
for me.
yeah. What it means is that if I'm taking myself out of what's in my head, and putting myself to the side for a moment when I'm in a conversation and I'm actually listening to the person that's talking to me and understanding what they're telling me, then I'm starting to understand that person. And I think that there's something to be said for we all just want to be understood. But how can I be understood if we're all trying to be understood? Because when I'm
Right.
trying to be understood, I'm focused on myself.
Okay,
I'm not focused on the other person.
person.
And
Mhm.
it becomes a very self-seeking thing in
Okay.
conversation. And my brain tends to shut off what the other person's saying because I'm focused on what I want to say, how I want to respond, and
Right.
what I want. Um, However, if we were all to seek to understand, then we would all be listening to each other and we would start to understand each other and in the process become understood ourselves.
Okay, I agree with that totally. Now, when we were talking, there's something that you said that I had an aha moment where you were talking about, like, where we were talking about those questions not being asked, or you said something where, oh, it's like having your own intention. I can't remember exactly what you were saying, but it was like a aha moment for me that, oh, it's about expectations. It's almost like you have this internal expectation, even though you don't ask these questions, like you're going in. So anything that person may not do completely may not satisfy that person. Like you said, the compatibility, it's though that the compatibility might not, it may seem on the surface that it doesn't work,
Yeah.
but maybe what the outer circumstances, the lack of questions
Yeah.
may cause that disconnect. Do you agree with that? Or
I do, but I also think that there's, and just go
Mhm.
back to porn
Yeah,
for a moment.
sure.
I think that there's this idea in our heads, especially the of us that base what we want and what we expect off of porn, that it's going to be this amazing experience from the start,
Right.
from the second one. That ignores the fact that we're all humans, and especially when we meet somebody that we don't know for the first time, there's going to be a certain period of getting to know each other and understanding what works, what doesn't work, what I like, what they like, what
Right.
they're willing to do, what I'm willing to do.
Right.
Um, and until that fumbling period, you get through that fumbling period, it's not going to be
The
that
that porn
amazing porn
that's
thing
very,
from the instant.
and I think gay men expect that.
Yeah,
And especially now that we're in this instant gratification environment,
yeah,
that I think that gay men, that's where I would say most gay men are disappointed sexually.
yeah.
And this might be personal, but from your experience, like out of, 100, how many people do you think that you've been with that you've had this ultimate great experience? Is it 50%, 20%, 30%? Like, what do you think in your roster that it was great? initially, first off, just bang, it was great.
I mean, there's been a few,
Okay.
but I think more often than not, those that I would put into the great category
Yeah.
didn't start off great from the beginning.
Okay.
the, the great ones were the ones where I I suppose those would be the ones where there was actually some when both parties are really into each other, and then it becomes more of a we thing than a me thing. Because when I'm just going into it seeking my own thing, then it's
Mhm.
all about me again, going back to that self-seeking. But when I go into something understanding that I'm not alone in this, there's
Right. The
one or more other people
people there.
there.
Hmm.
How do I step outside of myself in this very personal experience
But that's
and bring in whoever is with me to because it's a mutual thing. Like the best sex I've ever had has always been a mutual thing.
okay.
It's never been the ones where I'm like, you know what, maybe this isn't the most attractive guy in the world.
Well,
Maybe
right.
this isn't what I normally go
Yeah.
for, but I
Right.
need to get off. So,
Right.
so I'm gonna do this anyway.
Right. I get that. I mean, we've all been there.
Yeah.
Because I also feel that same way. But sometimes the need is necessary. Okay, I'm gonna
Yeah.
get it done. But I think that's what you said that made me think, because you also said that even if the person you might it may not be fulfilling, but if you're looking at it, that you're gonna have a good time.
Yeah.
It was something that you said like, oh, you look at it, well, why am I doing this kind
Yeah.
of thing?
Yeah.
And it made me kind of have to look at myself, because I don't ask that question. I
Yeah.
instantly get annoyed, or the person's not
Yeah.
listening to me, and then I'm also not saying, well, why am I doing this anyway?
Yeah.
That's what I got from you.
Yeah, I think I always say the why is the most important question. Sometimes it's the only question that matters. Because the who, what, when, and where, those are just details. But the why is what drives the whole thing. It's
Okay.
what drives our behavior.
Hmm.
It's what drives other people's behavior. It's the reason behind everything. Because without reason, there's always a reason. There's always a reason. Even if it's just small, because I need to get off.
Right.
That's a reason.
Reason. That is
That's
a
a reason.
reason.
But what I've found is that when it comes to whether it's hooking up or seeking a relationship, most often what I'm doing is I'm seeking connection in some way. And it's not always the most healthy way that I seek that connection. Sometimes I'm looking for it in surface level
Action. Right.
interactions. And it's and that's probably not the best place to find real authentic connection.
Right. I think that you and I'm a recovery coach, you are a recovery coach, and we
Yeah.
understand that. I always say that when the surface level of doing, like, gay men do crystal meth or whatever, find that that's not the root of, like, drug addiction, kind of speak. I mean, I
Yeah.
know that using and all that, I don't want to glorify that,
Yeah.
but I find that that's always a connector, meaning that's the way that people are communicate, like coming together, making a connection. Do you
Yeah.
feel that way?
Yeah. So for me, it was definitely a social thing.
It's a social
It's
aspect.
a social lubricant at first.
Right.
And for some people, it stays that way.
Right.
For others, it becomes more destructive. And however, you're right. I think that it has been used as a way to connect. We have to be careful that it's not creating a false connection because it can. So I think
So do we think that gay men, not just, some people don't use, some people use alcohol, whatever it may be with these apps, I think it's just because gay men have been told that they can't have relationships,
absolutely.
that this is why they feed into these somewhat destructive at times, toxic means of connecting.
Yeah, and it's more than just that. I think
Okay.
it goes beyond just not being able to have relationships. being taught that.
Hmm.
I think it's also being taught that gay sex is dirty or unworthy or wrong,
Okay.
and the shame that can create in us when it comes to going after what we want, what we like. We have the I know for me, I had this built-in self-hatred for myself because of growing up being taught those things. And that when as I got older and understood that that's what I wanted, it created this idea in my mind that there was something inherently wrong with me. And when the idea in my mind is that there's something inherently wrong with me and I shouldn't be this way, then I become unlovable, undesirable, and all these other things. And there's other things that play a role into those things too. Societal expectations on how we're supposed to look, how we're supposed to act, what we're supposed to like, who we're supposed
Supposed
to
to like.
like, all these things. When the reality of what we're into is different than what we've been taught to be into. This idea that there's something wrong with me
Right.
because of this can be very powerful, very limiting, create quite a bit of shame.
Right, because I find that some gay men, from my studies and understanding, that we are trauma bonding. A
Yeah,
lot of gay men trauma bond sexually as well. Now, you mentioned that you went through a healing, there for guys out there watching that are having these disconnected struggles, like they want to have a relationship or meet someone. I believe that they have to heal within. What are the things, and obviously things don't always work for everybody, but what did you do to kind of start your healing process?
yeah. So a lot of gay listeners are not going to like this,
Uh-oh.
but but for me, I had to put sex on the shelf for quite some time, over a year, on purpose, so that I could get connected with myself, so that I could heal the things that I needed to heal, or at least start to. Because that's going to be a lifelong process in a lot of ways, but also to learn who I actually was and who I was outside of what the porn fantasy was and what the societal expectations were and what my upbringing had taught me. I had to come to a comfortability level within myself, understand who I was, because for the longest time I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I liked. I went along with what I saw on porn, with what I heard other people say they were into, what I heard from messages in society, whether it's in
Mhm.
pop culture or whatever, what was expected of me as a gay man to be a part of. And I think that there is this idea, even within the gay community itself, of what we're supposed to be, and not so many of us don't fit that mold. In order to try to fit in, we try to
Emulate what
yeah,
we see,
emulate what we
what we see,
see
or
or
just try to
try
be
to
cool.
shove ourselves into this box that we don't fit into. And that in itself is inauthentic at its basic level. When I'm not being my authentic self, when I'm being inauthentic,
But
then the real me gets pushed to the side and I become unhappy, depressed, anxious about everything.
everything, right.
Yeah, unsure of myself
Hmm.
because I'm doing these things that whether I think they're me or not, um, if they're not me, then it's going against my basic core for who I am.
And I mean, and I had the same kind of experience, although mine was more, I was engaging in, I guess, being something for everyone and not being, like you said,
Yeah,
authentic to myself, regardless whether someone likes me or not. I was trying to please, I guess,
yeah.
people please. And so I also didn't have sex for a while. Now, was that difficult for you? Because I know somebody else who's like, I don't want to do that.
I can't
But
do
I can't do
that.
that. Was it difficult for you? And
In some ways, yes, and in other ways, no. It was more difficult for me probably towards the end than it was at the beginning.
really,
Yeah, because when I made that decision to do that, I was for like very early in recovery. I had just put down the drugs to try to heal from the trauma, not just the trauma of my past, but the trauma I had caused myself while using. Um, so at that point, my sex life had gone so far off the rails that it was easy for me to be like, you know what, I don't. There's been so much of this in my life lately that
I don't need it.
I don't need it right now. I'll be okay with it for a while. And there was also the pain that I was in at the time from that I had done to myself in the destruction of my active addiction. So it wasn't even on my mind.
Okay.
Now, as time went on and I made progress and healing started to happen and my sex drive started coming back, then it became more difficult. Yeah. It became more difficult then because now suddenly these desires are coming back.
Thoughts.
These thoughts and these feelings are coming back.
Mhm.
But I had to ask myself, am I truly ready
Right.
to step out there yet? And for a while I wasn't, even though I was having these urges and thoughts and feelings. And that's when it was difficult. But by that time I could handle that difficulty. By that time I was used to stepping into the uncomfortability and sitting in it because that's what I had been doing for quite some time in therapy and counseling. Because I'm a firm believer that growth doesn't happen in the comfortable; it happens in the
And
uncomfortable. Yeah,
uncomfortable. I
yeah,
mean, and for me, it was the opposite. It was more in the beginning that it was difficult for me to disconnect,
yeah,
because I had relied on these superficial kind of connections with people,
yeah,
and that I was kind of going back to my own, not isolated, but in a way, removing all that toxicity, kind of redefining who I was as a person, but still, because it was so ingrained in me, that craving, that desire, it took so long to get out of that, that it was more at the end that it was like, oh, I don't need that anymore. But I would say the struggle was occupying my time, because I don't know for you, were you able to not be on apps? Because I know a lot of people, they hear us talking, say, hey, you had to heal and not to have sex with people and stuff like that. But were you able to not be on an app? So, like, I could not be on an app while that time period, because it was almost temptation.
yeah.
We'll see. What
So
was your experience?
so for me, I definitely couldn't be on the apps because at first like it was a little touch and go. It took a while for me
Mhm.
to actually commit to that uh to that idea and to that concept of putting sex on the shelf because every time I would get feel bad about myself, my go-to would be to seek validation through sex. So on the apps I go because that's what I know. That's what how we
They
as a
just,
community had started
yeah.
started connecting with each other for sex. It was all online. So I actually had to make the decision to have a friend put a child lock on my phone
Oh, wow.
so that I could not access the apps at
Wow.
all.
Okay.
That probably played a big role in what made it easy
It made
is the
it
inability
to
to
do
yeah,
it. Right.
yeah,
See, I didn't have that, but I will say I did myself disjustices at times because I would toy with myself,
yeah,
dip in a little bit, just, oh, I can do this. And
yeah,
then it was like, oh, I can't do that,
yeah,
and obviously you might be on a path, but then we have to deal with all these thousands of other people who are not on that path,
yeah,
who aren't out, who don't care about your healing, who don't care about what your goals are. So that's the scary part. But I dipped and dabbed, but then eventually I slowly, as in recovery coaching, you know, they relapses and these things are incorporated in it so that there is no guilt and shame.
yeah,
That eventually people just, you know that they're going to happen. They happen. You get up, you move on, you don't harbor on them. And as you see time goes past, that the less you relapses you have, the space between them grow and grow and grow,
yeah,
depending on what someone's goal is. Some people are wants to be abstinent, that they don't want to do anything. Some people just want to periodically do it. So it's all about things like that. Now, when we talk about growth in like this hookups world, what can we say to people to maybe change how they are connecting with people? What are little things that they can do? Do you have any ideas that we can suggest to um, my followers who are trying to better themselves and who have stressed to me that they're tired of the hookup apps? They're having these negative experiences.
Yeah.
How can we create positive experiences in this negative environment?
Yeah. My first piece of advice is going to be to slow down.
So now,
Slow down. Yeah. Slow down. Get to know somebody first, especially if you're tired of these apps and these negative experiences. This instant gratification that you brought up earlier is driving so many of us to go for the first thing that says yes. And sometimes that means putting our wants and our needs to the side in order to have somebody over. And a lot of times, I know for me, that was rooted in not wanting to be alone, not wanting to feel alone. And so pumping the brakes and taking the time to have those conversations and really listen and understand and get to know somebody and let somebody in to get to know you can create a different experience.
I totally agree
Yeah,
with
I
you.
also think that if somebody's trying to stay away from the hookup apps, that can be a good idea for a lot of people. Maybe not for everybody,
Not for
but for
everybody.
other there's nothing wrong with going back to the old school way of meeting
Exactly.
people.
Maybe, maybe, right.
And if people don't remember what that was like, it wasn't just going out to the bars, it was also becoming a part of something that you enjoy, finding recreational activities that you enjoy, finding a local group within the queer community that also enjoys that, then you get to start off meeting people who you have a common interest with.
That is correct.
And that can be the basis of a conversation which can create an actual genuine connection. And I think that's one of the best ways to do that.
And my other two suggestions is therapy.
Yeah.
I went through therapy trying to understand why I was, I guess, trying to connect with people on a certain level that wasn't advantageous for me, that
Mhm.
were negative. And why was that? I guess the question of why. Why is that so important?
Yeah.
As I had shared with you, my point of connecting with substance was I needed the validation of people that normally might not be attracted to me on a normal. So
Yeah.
I could lure them by the substance and then have this fantasy guy, but he really wasn't into me. He wanted that
Yeah.
more so. So I would say therapy, trying to understand the why, like you said. And then the other thing is doing, like you said, pump the brakes. But I also say make a plan, meaning before you log off of these things, have some set plan. Like, okay, I'm going to call these people, my friends, to go to movies. I'm
Yeah.
going to do dinners or whatever that might be to substitute those 4, 5, 6 hours that unfortunately men stay on these apps, wasting time chatting with people. I think that helps kind of get over the 21 days that new
Yeah.
habit is created. I think that are some of the mechanisms to help men start to kind of investigate a new process. And I guess the last thing before we wrap up, how did you know it was time to go back? What was an indication to you? You said desire and all that, but
Yeah.
what made you be comfortable that it was safe for you to go back?
For me, it was I got to a place where I had done quite a bit of healing. There was a lot of work that I did in therapy and counseling, in my journal, even in learning who I was. When I started to understand myself better, um, and I understood what I was actually doing when I was seeking these instant hookups.
Mhm.
When I know what I actually want and need, then then I'm more comfortable in seeking that because now I know what I'm looking for. And it wasn't this instant thing that I was seeking for validation. Wasn't just seeking to have anybody beside me in the same room. And it wasn't,
But even if you
yeah,
did, you had a better understanding
you know,
that that's what you were looking for. It was a clear objective on both parties that this is what you're looking for,
yeah,
right? I guess that's where I think a lot of gay men who are looking to strive to have a different connection with online apps is that you said being authentic, asking questions, although sometimes people ignore those questions, but reiterating them, but also not assuming because someone doesn't want to do something, it doesn't mean that it's against you.
yeah,
It may be, or that person, it may be that they're holding back. Maybe we're not listening to give them what they need, or we're falling into the trap of, I guess, like you said, porn aesthetic and things of that nature. So I think it's more or less having an open dialogue and kind of, I guess when we say, the instant gratification, there are ways, though, quickly to identify and ask people things. And like you said, that really changed how I see things is that even though it might not be you expected in that very moment, doesn't mean it can't happen.
yeah. So that was it goes beyond to say just because it's not happening in that moment doesn't mean it can't happen.
Happen.
But it's also something I think we were talking about versatility
That's
when
it.
we were,
Yeah.
when we mentioned this. It's about understanding that just because what I was seeking in my mind isn't happening doesn't mean that I can't accept that that's not happening in the moment. Understand that maybe that's been removed, and now finding a way to still enjoy what I'm doing, because if I take away the disappointment that that's not happening, because that disappointment was created by the expectation that it would happen.
Right.
So if I take that expectation out, take that disappointment out, I can now look at what's going on, understand that what I'm doing right now is still enjoyable, even if I'm not doing that. So why don't I sit in this enjoyment instead of that disappointment?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was what made me want to have this conversation with.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you brought that full circle. Thank you. Because that's actually why I invited Travis to have this dialogue. There was a lot more, and I want to probably invite you back. But I think the key points is what he just said is about the expectation and creating positive experiences, even though you might not be getting fully what you want out of a situation or hookup, that there's always a need for you to identify why you're there and make the best of a situation, I guess. And
Yeah.
also, because we're in a instant gratification standpoint in a world that understand that we have to kind of, like you said, remove the layers and see people for who they are, because we might be missing out on a couple of people that if we don't take those layers off, that might be the good one and versus the bad ones. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So everyone, I want to say thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Twisted Truth with Corey. This is Travis. I want to say thank you, Travis, for having this conversation. I think it will help others as they pursue their online dating experience. So everybody, remember to like, subscribe, tell your friends. And on my website, The Twisted Truth Pod, you're going to be able to connect with Travis. His link will be on there, so you can hit him up if you have any questions. And we will hope to see him again. So thank you again, Travis.
Thank you.
All right.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Twisted Truth with Corey Wesley. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share the show with someone who needs a fresh perspective. Remember to stay curious, stay bold, and always remember this: the truth isn't always what it seems. Until next time, keep thinking, keep questioning, and keep twisting the truth. See you soon.